on his demand for about a year. He sent something I had done to Case. And the first thing I knew, Case was all over me. Wanted me to do a book, which I did. It was a pitiful little book, but anyway, it was a how-to book kind of on prospect research. And then I was asked to speak at Case 5. I'm not going to take long, but I was asked to speak at Case 5, District 5. And you were there. And Kent Dove, who some of you may remember his name, he was at Drake University, introduced me. And I did not know who the person was he was introducing. I wasn't the best researcher in the country. I mean, I didn't even know what a prospect researcher was. And he was telling people that this was a new field. I was the leader. So I, got up sort of in shock and spoke, and the sled was going downhill. And one of my colleagues at Kalamazoo College was Bruce Schlussman. He was a baby, a real baby. So anyway, that's the way I eventually got connected with Vince Foster. Bond, you repeat none of this. But anyway, I just wanted you to know. And then, because I came out here to visit these guys who decided to organize a firm and wanted me to go in with them, I met Kathleen. And I'd met her at this Case 5 conference that she came to, expecting a real expert, but she got me. And so that was kind of the backup to this. So I had the privilege of being invited by these women, and really the reason I'm here today, I guess, to be a guest when they founded the Minnesota chapter. Another person that we should mention is Ann Castle from Harvard, who was very interested in this, and a woman named Emily Fitzenmeyer, who was at Marquette. She was 10 times better than I was at the actual research, but she didn't have as big a mouth. Didn't write material and stuff like that. So I really give a lot of credit to Emily Fitzenmeyer for establishing some of the processes. We're so unique.
It's on the registration form.
Thank you. This is so great. So a question for all of you is, which I guess Bobby's answered a little bit, is how did you get into this field? Because let's face it, no one says, I want to grow up and go into prospect research or prospect development. And back then there was no field. So how did you get into this?
Well, I was laid off at the bank that I was working at, and the guy who laid me off, and still a friend, truly, I invited him to my retirement party, I'm just saying. He was, got the St. Paul paper, which I did not, and so he knew that I was off the door, of course, at the bank, and he was like reading the St. Paul paper and found this ad for this little job at St. Kate's, and it said research coordinator, I don't know, something like that, and he, showed me the ad, and he said, you can do that. I'm like, oh, okay. So I go to the library. I get Bobby Strand's book through Prospect Researcher, kind of how to out of the library.
Any prospect researcher in there?
Yeah. So I got the book out of the library, and then I knew a person at St. Kate's and asked, so who are these two people I'm interviewing with? One of them was an alum and was married at the time the mayor of St. Paul. So how hard is it to do a research profile on this couple, since she was an alum and was one of a few people who invited Eldridge Cleaver to campus in 1974 or something. And anyway, so this is not these are not your everyday people. So I did a profile and brought that to the interview, and the rest, as we say, is history. And that was in '91. So that was just it.
I don't remember the first conference that we had in Minnesota, what year that was. Was it Spring Hill, or where was it?
Yes, it was at Spring Hill.
Okay,
Yeah.
so whatever year that was, I remember I had been doing research, but we didn't probably call it that, and I was really interested, and I remember saying, I want to go to this conference. So I went to the conference, and then I wasn't able to go to conference for many years later because our leadership said, oh, we don't need that. It wasn't until we hired a couple of men from Penn. They just happened to be men, came from Penn State, and they said, what, you don't have a prospect research department? And And we created one, and kind of the rest is history. I knew that was my love, prospect management. I remember, I have Bobby's book still in my office, by the way.
That's where it is, I
Yeah.
knew we had it.
And Kathleen Foley, I remember when you and Inez, they used to give tours
Yes.
of the library downtown Minneapolis.
I know, it's
And I was on one of the tours, and I was like, wow, they are so smart. I just, it was like, we don't do that anymore.
And the probate court.
And the probate
Yeah.
court.
Right.
Oh, that you can see the divorce proceedings and the marriage proceedings. I'm like, okay, I'm not sure I want to see the divorce outcomes, but, yeah, it's been a great, career. So thanks for you guys for paving the way. It's been a great career path.
I would just like to interrupt for a minute and say, when Debbie said we created a department, we didn't, Debbie did.
Oh,
Credit where credit is due.
thanks, Leslie.
Michael?
Well, you kind of heard it from the keynote. I mean, I just stumbled into it, but it was something that I've been doing all along, and it just seemed like a natural fit. And I will say, I forgot to say that, but at that conference, that San Diego conference, and all those people, Michael Seymour, Kathy Toronis, and all of these incredible people that I met, the one thing they said, you got to get Bobby's book. You got to get Bobby's book. And I remember immediately got the book, and I just looked and I went, I can do this. I've got something, and that I wouldn't let anybody in my office touch it. They're going, oh, can I? No. No, you can sit in my little broom closet with me, which is not going to be fun, but you don't get to take that book out of my office. Anything, take the variety, but don't take mine.
Well, let me ask you then, what was it like? Can you each talk about what it was like doing research before there were all these databases and computers and all of that? How did you do that, and what could you do given you had to go to the resources? Bobby, do you want to start?
Well, you took a lot of field trips.
Yeah, that's right.
I love field trips. We went to the clerk's office, we went all over, we went wherever we needed to go to get the information. And actually, to tell you the truth, some of that was easier, because you got input that was professional at times. If you got the right person, and they had an interest in what you were doing, you could really, really learn a lot fast. Much more meaningful data than looking at a database. Because that has no why and how and when, and so there were a few advantages. And we did a lot of interviews. I did a lot of interviews. That's the way I started. I had an unusual circumstance because I had the carte blanche from the president.
Right.
You know, so who's going to tell me not to do something? So I could interview trustees. I could interview anybody I wanted to. So I did all of that. And so I didn't grow up in the same environment that some researchers have had to deal with. But we went and got it wherever it was. We went and got the information, and then gradually, did you ever make those? What do you call them now? You put them in. Never mind. Anyway, as databases came on the market, of course, we thought we were died and gone to heaven.
I remember making a lot of phone calls. I had a little spiel. My sweet little voice, hi. I'm wondering if you could help me or direct me to the office that could. I'm looking for information on Kristen Barlow's property holdings in Hennepin County. Would you have an alphabetical list that could tell me that? And then they'd say, oh, yeah, sure. How do you spell that? And then they'd call it up and they'd tell me what property she owned. We had plat books, which I had a lot of for the counties in Minnesota, and it would say, that this farm had 312 acres, and this is where it was located, and things like that. We used books. I got started in prospect research. I was working in the computer center at Carleton. My background's in computers. I took every class they had at the U back in that was like 3. But the computer filled this room, and now there's more power in my watch. But I saw the posting, and that was a bi-weekly job, and I had 2 weeks of vacation, and my husband's a school teacher, and I had 2 kids, and this posting came around for the director of prospect research, and it said it was an exempt job, and it had 4 weeks vacation, and it talked about computers and library, and I used to be a bookmobile librarian, so that's why I applied, and I knew my way around the library. And so, yeah, phones, books.
Yeah, and interviews, public offices.
Well, at St. Kate's, at the women's college, what is true generally of women's colleges is that the young women would graduate from school and move across the street to an apartment, and then for the next 50 years would write in their reunion booklets what they all been doing every 5 years. And in addition to that, they would tell the alum office what they were up to also. Oh, well, you know, I'm getting married, and here's all about my husband, and I had another degree, and then, you know, so they'd just like tell us all this stuff. And as you heard this, you know, this morning from Michael and anybody else that's paying attention, the very least we should know about our prospects and people is what they have told us.
That's right, that's right.
And if you don't know what they've told you, then you don't know what you're doing, you know, basically. So anyway, so that was a, you know, very important thing to learn. So I used paper. I mean, you know, there was no digitization. You know, there was no digitization of anything. You know, so I would read pieces of paper and believe what they told me. Which, you know, is easier now. Let me just say, it's a good deal. Well, it's a good deal easier then than it is now. There's, you know, like exaggeration can be found pretty readily. The other thing I learned in prospect research a long time ago, in addition to using all these paper files and things, is that if you find out extremely unpleasant information about someone who's a prospect to you or their husband, you have to prove it 3 times over. You can't just sort of say, oh, well, in addition, you know, you have to back everything up that is like really bad news. You know, you don't want these people on the board because, you know, of all these unpleasant things. So, and that was made pretty clear to me when I found out about this guy who owned a lap dancing joint in Kansas. So anyhow, it's just, you know, it's just not the sort of thing that you necessarily would want the little misses then to be on the board. So I'm just saying, you know.
In addition to what you guys have already talked about too, is we spent so much time, and you know, maybe you look at these still today, I don't know, but so many times actually in the papers in Minneapolis,
Right.
Star Tribune and
Yeah.
St. Paul Pioneers, looking at the business section, but oh my gosh, no, the obituaries.
Yeah.
Reading about who their family was, who they're married to, I mean, that was like, we were like, wow, we just won the lotto or something. It's like, we just spent a lot of time on the obituary notices.
I still do. Sort of hangovers.
I was actually, one of the tools that I used at my disposal was my mother's chocolate chip recipe. And because I realized I had to, because of the lack of resources, I was at the libraries. And so was really gathering that. And so I really made good friends with the librarians. And I was, again, so thankful. So I would bring in like boxes of chocolate chip cookies. And then they go, remember that person you told me about? Yeah, well, I looked into this and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I had a prospect research team. So I realized I wanted to put into my budget, it's like, can I put in Nestle chocolate chips, flour, sugar, and all that? Because it was so helpful. But it was really making friends with them because they were so excited about people asking them and going in and really partnering with them. So I still, to this day, I don't care how many resources you have, take a field trip and make your best friend your library.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
No, I'm a librarian,
Oh, okay.
so preach.
well, I'm very close friends with one of our archivists who is fantastic. So now I'm learning about doing archival work. Yeah, it's great. So I'm wondering if you can each talk a little bit about one or two of the biggest changes in the field that you've seen over the years.
Okay. Wow. Well, automation and,
Yeah.
and the databases are definitely the biggest change. I think we began metrics quite a few years ago, but I think the increased use of measurement and metrics in your work is a big change. And then I have retained relationships with a number of people, like officers in banks who handle wealth advisors are some of the best resources you're not gonna ever ask them to betray their confidences, but if you get close to a community of people like that, you can get more information that you never asked for than any other place. So just moving in the right circles, making the right, acquaintances and getting ready, and then being indispensable, delivering. I think as we saw today, I think the standard has continued to go up, and it is absolutely necessary to have. I remember that the president I worked with, Dr. George Rainsford, he was 6'7", wore bow ties, yelled at everybody but me. It's not the light, you know. So he began to think, well, if he took me with him, and I'd forgotten to tell him something, I'd be there then. So I made quite a few trips with him. We got to, you may remember this, I think I told you about it, but we got to New York City once and walked up to a 7-floor flight of stairs to a dinky little apartment to see a Rockefeller that I had told him had all kinds of money. But he was 82, very ill. She was 33, I think it was, and a young child with him, and that was clearly going to get anything he had left. So it was really a bomb steer. Really, really bad. But it didn't look like that on paper. So, you learn as you go along to really evaluate. Another place I learned a lot was from some clients, and you'll relate to that, and Bond will. I remember going to Dartmouth, and this was before prospect research by that name existed, but they had this room full of 24 people, and all they did was find information about prospective donors. So they were doing things manually and literally that, we were trying to shape into a system, but there they were plugging away. So I still believe that this has always been, even back to the times when there was one fundraiser in an institution, that fundraiser would take time to find out who and why and where and all of those questions that we try to answer today. So I don't know if that answers exactly the question you were asking, but I think it's really changed, and yet it hasn't in the terms of what you need to know, how thorough you need to be, how dangerous it is not to be correct, which I have a key story, and he fortunately didn't hold it against me, but that was really bad, especially since I was there. So, anyway, you just, you keep refining the process. The thing I worry about most is that we get so much process that we get our eyes off the goal. And so I think trim it away, get rid of a lot of stuff. Don't add to the process. Get rid of all the process you can and still run a clean ship. Because if you don't, you'll put your time into the process instead of finding the right information. And that's not gonna do anybody any good. And that information, by the way, is one thing that has not changed that you need. A little different form.
I was thinking besides technology and the information that's ready at our our fingertips is really the level of professionalism that this, organization has taken, and nationally and actually internationally, but also the speed at which we're not only can get the information, but which we're asked to deliver it, is so fast. And so some of that that's probably not good, but it is what it is. It sometimes feels more corporate at some places, I think. And so what Bobby is saying is so true. It's like, why are we really doing this? And really trying to step back and say, really, how are we helping change the world, or whatever, wherever you're working in your nonprofits, to say, how am I impacting, how am I making any kind of changes? It really helps you, I think, put some of that data in the right, whatever word I was gonna say, path or something, but it's good to step back and say, why am I doing this? You know, people ask me, why have you been at the University of Minnesota for 1 million years? It's not quite 1 million, but pretty close. And it's because of the mission. You know, I came from the medical side, and you just learn. I mean, every day you're learning about the researchers, you know, and so how can you not get behind children's health or cancer research? And when the foundations emerged, I thought I was gonna lose that. Well, I didn't. It's just like there's more things like libraries and books, and, you know, there's just more, and just, you know, so I think that hasn't changed at all, but just kind of step back when you're in such a rush, I guess. You didn't ask me that question, but I just offered that.
Yeah, I think what's good is, I mean, it's slightly off, but that despite, you know, the quick technology and all this information and all that, what is still there that I remember from the beginning is we operate from a very high ethical standard.
Mm-hmm.
And that we always still come from that place, and you know, that to me is really important. Having grown up, one, in a small town and being the prominent family, having been in the entertainment industry where people were lurking in places to try to find things, and, you know, really, but first and foremost, everything we do is nothing like that, and that hasn't changed, and that's important.
So I have 2 more questions, and this is the one I told Kat I told Bobby there was a stinger. So what's the best story you can share about early days in PD or in APRA that you can share publicly?
Well, we might as well just leave the panel down.
I think Kathleen is best.
I've got one. I worked for Vice President, and he had been a sociology professor, and then became dean. And as part of his deanship, he, you know, came up with these programs to spend the money. And then the college said to him, "You're coming up with all these ways. Now we want you to be the VP to raise the money." And he just had these wonderful sayings. He'd walk by my office and he'd go, "Holy hot spit, that was a good one you gave me." But one time he came by the office and he said, "You know, I was visiting with this alumni couple, and they said, we have to go to Iowa this weekend because Susie, his wife, the woman in the pair, and Susie has to go see about her farms." He heard that, and again, this was the days of plat books and phone calls, and he said, "Do you think you could find that out?" Well, we had great archives and alumni files, which we filmed in 1999. Yes, we scanned them, got rid of all the paper, and I found their marriage announcement that they had sent in to the alumni office, and it said where they were from in Iowa, and I called the property assessor, and my line that I just told about, "Hi, do you have an alphabetical listing?" And they said, "Yes, we do, but you know, they have so much property that, you know, could you just give me your name and address and I'll just send it to you." And I was on the first APRA ethics committee, and we had a policy where if somebody asked us that, we had to say, we had to have it sent to, you know, Kathleen Foley, Carleton College, and so I did, and they sent the stuff, and then the vice president went to see them again and talked to them, and very welcoming and stuff, and they said, "Yeah, who the hell is Kathleen Foley, and why is she looking into our real estate?" And the vice president, God bless him, said, "Well, well, she's just doing her due diligence. We are a nonprofit, and we want to spend our time with the people who can make the best difference. And you two can make a huge difference to this college. Oh. And so I said, hot spit, Dan.
That was a great story.
So thank goodness for online property records.
You know, it's funny because
The person in the courthouse had told them.
Uh-huh. It's funny because when you were saying that, I remember when I was trained in being told you don't call in small towns because you never know, could be their aunt or their uncle or something.
You have a big towns.
I can top that. So I am very new in my job. I hardly knew what research was. And I had gone to the courthouse in downtown Minneapolis to read divorce files, which were just sitting there ready to be read. You know? So when you get there, what you do is you sign your name on a piece of paper and tell where you're from, and then this is the file that you want, and then you go over and sit in the corner someplace, and then you can read the file. Of course, you can't take any. Well, there were no pictures of anything like that at the time. So I do my little thing there, find out, yeah, well, there really isn't much going on in this divorce. You know, there's not a lot of money, talk about the kids and stuff. It's like, okay, well, duly noted, got it, and if I said the name of the person who I was doing research on, half of the people in the room would say, oh, and the other half would say, huh, who, anyhow, so there's this like famous, really rich guy who owned a lot of companies and stuff. And when I get home from work in the evening, I get a phone call from this person at home saying to me, why are you looking at my divorce records? And I'm like, well, okay, there must be an answer to this question. And I should come up with one pretty quick now. And I said to him, well, it is a matter of public record. These files, our divorce records, and are open to the general public. And I am a member of the government. So, which was true. And anyway, this stuff was publicly. I mean, it was just sitting there, like how much your property is worth and where it is and everything. And he said, well, is this to do anything to do with my children? I said, absolutely not, because they were minor children. I said, this has nothing whatsoever to do with your children. And I sort of tap danced for a little while. And finally he decided that I was not a criminal or an axe murderer, and I wasn't going to be showing up at his house, and so he was done talking to me, and then I immediately called the guy that hired me on and said, you'll never guess who called me. And he's like, oh my. So anyway, well, we never did get a gift from that person anyway. So I think the divorce might have been just a little more final than you thought.
I've got a little bit of a similar one. This is something you might think about whether your records are paper or online. When I was at Kalamazoo College and doing research, I don't know if anybody's old enough in this room for Upjohn to mean anything to you, but it was a huge pharmaceutical company at the time. And we had that company related person was on our fundraising committee and had made a huge gift promise and had undergone a nasty paper full of divorce. And so people began to bring me copies of that divorce stuff to go in the file. And I said, no, not going in there. I made brief notations of dates, but I did not put any of that in there. And our files were subpoenaed in that divorce case. That can happen, whether it's electronic or whether it's paper.
That's right.
So that's something you want to think about. Think about the way you phrase things,
Absolutely.
symbols you use, and boy, was I glad. I mean, you're not that smart. Really grateful for that, because we would have been in deep in all of the articles and things I've seen and used. So there are some things to think about even now.
Debbie and Michael, do you have any stories you want to share?
We could write a book.
Yeah.
I just have my gift officer left this full profile. I don't know why he did this, but he brought it to the meeting. And he left it on her coffee table.
Oh.
And he got a call, and he called me up, and he goes, remember that prospect research report? And I said, yeah, how'd the visit go? Went pretty good and everything and all that. And I said, well, you're going to write it up? Yeah. And he says, but by the way, I left the report on her coffee table. I'm like, you did what? And she wants to talk to you. And then he transferred her over. And I said, hello? And she said, are you Michael? And I said, yes. And she goes, did you do this on me? And I went, yeah. And she goes, it's good. But you left out a few things. And I went, well, then invite me over for cocktails and we'll figure that out. But I went through all of that panic and all of that, but what I appreciated is kind of like what you were mentioning, everything in there was factual. There's nothing that I would be embarrassed about. But what I appreciated is that she was a philanthropist. She understood that we did our homework and going through. So, but it could have turned into a nasty situation. And then at that point then, I instituted what stays in Vegas, stays in Vegas. These profiles do not leave your office. And yeah, it could have been a bad scene.
Did you really say that to her?
Yeah, I did. I
For
said,
drinks?
invite me over for drinks and we'll chat. And because I could tell.
Okay, so we have about 7 minutes left. I have one last question. What's the one thing in your career of which you're most proud, or what is one piece of advice or wisdom you'd like to share that you haven't shared? Either or both. Sure.
Trust but verify.
Well, I think what I appreciate most is helping bring together a person who really needs to share, and an organization that really needs to have that person share. I think the act of giving, and I think if you don't have a lot of reverence for that, you're in the wrong business. Because everything we do is really about that. It's not, we have a lot of funny stories, but that's not what it's about. And the very act of giving to me is so profound and so helpful to our society. If you look back across the years, you see so many great things we have in our society that we would not have without in-depth philanthropy. And by the way, America is the philanthropic country. I've worked in several countries, and some of them have great programs. Some of them have grown tremendously over the last several years, but America was built in so many ways on philanthropy. So for me, the most wonderful experience, and I've been on both sides of that aisle, both the frontline fundraiser as well as a person who prepares that individual, but just to be a part of helping that happen in a way that everybody feels good and everybody gets something out of it is, I think, the greatest gift to me. And meeting people like Kathleen and Francis and Michael
I was
and
going to
all
say,
these people.
thanks for all you guys for staying to listen to these stories. I really enjoyed listening to all of you. So thank you for staying at the end of the day. I was thinking on the drive down actually about, we always hear about how different, frontline fundraisers are than those of us in the PD world. And I remember way back when, before I started that department, the managers thought just because I love people and talk a lot that I couldn't do the detail. And they kind of tested me and they surprised me. And what I have found that's so important is we're in the relationship business as well. Whether it's getting to know, all of you guys in our relationship to help our network and find out what others are doing and learn from there, which, by the way, I hear that we're a lot more generous with our skills and resources than other, like, I won't name the other associations, but that we're really, And then you make lifelong friendships, you know, as well as helping in your careers. I've met some of the best people. So you know what, my first presentation at Case 5, it was my first presentation, it was at Case 5 with a major gift officer. And it was getting a seat at the table, you know, and the same thing is true. You gotta work with the with the major gift officer. I'd say we're not so much different. It's all about relationships.
Anything else?
Thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome.
Really
I just want to
appreciate it.
commend you. I was at the first organizing meeting by invitation. I did nothing to make it happen, but I was there, and it was in the Landmark Center. Yeah, I remember that. And then I was at the organizing meeting for the national, and I didn't really do anything there either, but I was there. So I really have followed this organization for many years, and wish you well.
I just have a comment, and I think it's a really important comment. The one thing that really stands out of working in this profession, and I've now been here nearly 15 years, is that there are people in the profession that have, for a very, very long time, fostered connections amongst ourselves. And several of them, many of them, are sitting at the front of this room right now. So I am very grateful for that. And there are other people I can think of, people that I work with. I've only been in Minnesota for 4 years, so my network's a little different, but I think that's really important. So we, I think, are collectively very grateful for that. So
Thank you.
Anytime.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.